Welcome everybody to another Indie Dev Spotlight video here on the channel. We are doing once a week Indie Spotlight streams, and these are the recaps of it. And if you'd like to submit a game for a future one, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We're beginning with the Steam Spring Festival of Games Spotlight. And we've got a lot of games, and we're going to be starting off with The Curious Expedition 2. The first game was a roguelike, kind of in some sense similar to Renowned Explorers, in the fact that we are charting into undistant or unexplored lands to find treasure, fame, and glory. But that one had a greater focus on resource management, keeping your crew sane, and not letting things go horribly wrong. The big thing beginning with this demo is that the developers have switched from a pixel art style to kind of a graphic novel hand-drawn look. And at the moment, it definitely looks different too, and some of the detail here, especially with this background, looks impressive. I don't know if I would rate it higher than the pixel art, but that's just my kind of a preference there. From what we play of the demo, and with these games being demos from the Steam Festival, it does mean that some of them are longer or shorter than others. But from what we played, the game seems to follow very much in the similar design of the first game. As in, you're going to go to a procedurally generated land, looking for treasure while making sure to keep track of your resources, items, and the general health and safety of your crew. As for the first game, your key resource is going to be sanity, and that's measured by that ominous looking bar in the upper right hand corner of the screen. Performing tasks, moving around, and just generally exploring the world will drain sanity. When it hits 0 or goes in the negative, very bad things begin to happen. Now, as with the first game, a major part about the design is resource management. You're going to have a lot of items in the game that have multiple uses to them. They could be used as weapons, trade, or to help guarantee certain events that come up. Now, your crew are characters who have their own personalities and traits to them that in turn can influence what happens to them or affecting them if you make a certain choice or not. As you saw there with Sing not liking the fact that I was defiling grave sites. Now, the bad news about the demo is that we did not get to see combat. The combat system of the game is not yet implemented, at least in the demo that was available. From the first game, combat involved managing dice rolls, and each side of the dice had a certain symbol, and then the symbols could be combined to perform certain attacks. So it could be like if you combine like a rope with a gun with another rope, could initiate a special move. And I'm sure they're probably planning something similar with The Curious Expedition 2. With that said, from what I played of the demo, it feels very much like the first game, which unfortunately I didn't quite enjoy as much as other people. There's a lot of randomness at play, and the kind of focus on planning for resources and hoping to have the item that you need for a specific event, I just didn't really enjoy that kind of play. And the combat system also runs into the issue of, again, of RNG with dice rolls. But if you enjoyed the first game, then this seems to be poised to be bigger and better than that one. If you didn't enjoy it, then I don't know if, at least from this demo that we played, if there's going to be enough here to kind of bring you back to check it out. But with that said, let's move on to our next spotlight. And we turn to the game Quench. This is a puzzle-ish kind of game, where our goal is to guide animals across the land, keeping them alive, and making use of kind of weather-based powers, or elemental-based powers, in order to make sure that they have the resources and the path needed to get through it. And the general story is that we are a guardian for a tribe of elephants who are making a pilgrimage to a great tree, and to hopefully bring favor back and save the land, which has gone desolate and barren due to an unexplained incident. So the game itself, in terms of the core gameplay, is that your job is to basically guide the herd across the land. You're able to use powers, as you see at the bottom of the screen there, to manipulate things, such as throwing water down to grow grass so they'll have food to eat as they're crossing over. You can use earthquakes to destroy rocks or things in your path, lightning to set things on fire, and you're limited based on the number of times you can use that power, and that is determined by the level that you're on, as well as finding shrines in the land that you can then reactivate to gain more resources along those lines. To get kind of the best score, you need to guide every animal across the land without losing any of them. And you'll have to be careful of their stamina, as well as what paths you take in the level. The different paths will offer varying resources, as well as the distance between save zones. And you can kind of stay in an area and let the animals regain their stamina for as long as you want, which becomes a major factor in some of the later levels that introduce environmental hazards. As we were nearing the end of the demo on our stream, they did introduce additional animals, which I'm assuming will either join your herd or offer different considerations and paths. The main issue that I had that kind of gave me some reservation about Quench is the long-term viability of this core gameplay. As we were playing this game, it started to get a little bit on the repetitive side, despite introducing new hazards and obstacles for your animals to deal with. Because you don't really control them, you more or less direct them, it does limit your interactions to the powers themselves. And it does make things, again, feel more like a puzzle of you trying to figure out exactly what the game wants you to do, given the powers and resources available. But I couldn't see myself playing this game for hours on end, at least in this current state. The game does have, I think, like a 3-star system for getting all your animals through a level, and it does get on the more difficult side. But it's going to be, I think, interesting to see how people resonate with this game, and whether or not they're going to stick with it all the way through to the end. And like I said, I wasn't sure if the additional animals that get introduced do change up the rules, and the game did hint at more modifiers and things to keep track of the further you played. And again, with this being a demo, it did limit us in terms of what we could see. And with that, let's move on. And we now turn to a roguelike beat-em-up by the name of Tunche. Now for this demo, we only got to play base until the first kind of boss fight. But the game has a gorgeous looking aesthetic there. I think this looks pretty much like a hand-drawn look and feel to it. And the game itself is pretty much about you moving through this jungle, trying to figure out a way to get out, while beating up a lot of little and not so little creatures trying to get you. The appeal or the aesthetics of the game are, like I said, really quite impressive, especially for this genre. Now the gameplay revolves around you picking up buffs as you go through each area, and from the demo, I don't believe it is procedural, or at least in the demo it wasn't. They may go for more of the procedural kind of stitching handmade areas together like we see in other roguelikes. But combat is about kind of keeping these enemies contained because they can easily surround you and then do massive damage. You have a normal attack, a heavy attack. Each character has a super move that can be used once you fill up a meter that unlocks about a minute later into this footage. You can juggle enemies to keep them from attacking you, while some enemies I think did get hyper armor. You just want to basically get them away from being able to do any kind of attacks and then wail on them. And you can see I'm getting a rating in the upper left as well. And as you play through, the various buffs and such that you'll get will become more of a factor in terms of you surviving, as enemies start to attack from all over the place. And the game, I believe, is going to be set up for 2-player co-op. I don't know if it's going to have any more than that. I think the only real issue that I have with the game is that I was recently played through the amazing Fight and Rage, and one of the things I enjoyed about that one was just how fluid combat felt. This one feels a little bit more cumbersome in terms of setting up for multiple attacks, chaining combos, etc. You don't have the variety of moves, at least not at the start. The game did hint at unlocking more abilities and powers as you get further in. But again, with this being a demo, it was limited in that regard. Enemies have a lot of health, and with this first boss fight, you have to knock out his shield before you can actually do any real damage to him. But the game definitely shows promise. Again, the aesthetics are fantastic, and the idea of a roguelike beat-em-up is something that we don't see a whole lot of these days. And I hope that with the finished version, there will be more depth to the actual combat system. But with that said, we're going to do our Patreon supporter and sponsor shout out now, and when we come back, we got a few more indie games to look at for this spotlight. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, link down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. We go from one roguelike to another. This is Hyper Parasite. For this one, the story is that we are a parasite, think like The Thing from, well, The Thing, who has landed in post-apocalyptic 1980s, with our mission to take over the president, who has conscripted everybody in the United States to try and kill us. And it's up to us to go on a one parasite, or I believe there is co-op play mission, to take over the White House. The game itself features, again, procedurally generated levels built on these handmade environments, with the key element being our ability to possess or take over the various citizens who are trying to kill us. In our parasite form, we are quite weak and will die in 1 or 2 hits. But taking over allows us to make use of their attacks as well as buffing the various forms. And all the enemies in the game are kind of tiered to the specific chapters, with harder and more advanced characters showing up in the later biomes. Now, the persistent element of the game seems to be acquiring the brains of the newer characters, which you can then use in-game resources to then unlock so you can capture them for future plays. Now, from what we played of the game, I like the music and the general look and feel to it, but I feel that it needs a little bit more in terms of depth to these mechanics, as we kind of finished the demo very easily, and I wasn't sure just how much more or how much else there's going to be in terms of the complexity to the game. Now, we didn't even finish the first chapter, and there were elements such as unlocking shortcuts or future plays, again, the new characters and stuff like that, but I'm not quite sure where the roguelike replayability or variance is going to come in. But the game definitely seemed like they were going for very much tongue-in-cheek humor, and I didn't really have any issues from it in terms of the core gameplay loop. And if you are looking for another roguelike style game, especially if you enjoy Synth, keep an eye out for this one. But otherwise, I think I'm going to see where things develop more before I kind of render any greater judgment on it. But with that, let us move on. And we now turn to a curious game called Sons of Ra. This is a competitive, kind of like quasi-RTS game. It follows similar to the kind of sending minions out style of a MOBA, with the emphasis on tower building and making use of powers. So the whole aesthetic of the game is that we're playing it on these kinds of tabletops using figures that move around, which I always love when games go that route. But the objective is to tear down your opponent's temple before they tear down yours. And to do that, you'll need to play units who will go down the multiple paths. Later boards introduce more paths and more starting positions that you can use. Units have a quasi rock, paper, scissors element to them. If a unit can reach the opposing temple, it causes damage to it. Temple runs out of health, you win. You can spend resources to put new buildings on, unlock new units and towers. And when you start the game, you can choose an Egyptian god that then gives you access to specific god powers. What you just saw right there, kind of like the purple haze effect, was the opposing god power. Towers are basically set up as stacked defenses. They will not be targeted by individual units, with exception to catapults or siege weapons. And as you can see, there's definitely a strategy of making use of the right counter, as well as kind of quality versus quantity in terms of units. One really powerful unit can just lay waste to a lot of smaller units, provided they have cover. And the game is basically played either until time runs out, or until there is a winner. The complexity of the game can be a little tricky. I kind of lost the first thing because I wasn't even sure how to place units down. But after that first run, I started to get into it. This is clearly a game that is about tempo style play. Once you start winning and kind of creating these human, or I guess figurine barricades to stop the enemy from getting to your temple, it's kind of very hard for them to recover, because an early win knocking out their units will make it harder for them to reach your side. And as time goes on, you can use gold and resources to plop down buildings that can provide benefits. These are kind of the ways of moving into the mid and late game of a match to give you a greater advantage. Now, from the demo that we played, it was only competitive play versus the AI or having a friend for local play. I don't know if they're going to add in a campaign, additional rules and modifiers, etc, etc. But this is kind of an interesting game, and if you're looking for something different that you can play with your friends, I would say keep an eye out for this one. But with that, we are going to wrap up this video for the indie games that we covered. Trust me, there will be more videos coming real soon with the rest of the games that we played, and tune in every Wednesday night for our Indie Dev Spotlight stream. If you'd like to submit a game for a future stream, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We are always looking for new games. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we study the art and science of games. You'll find all the games listed here, or spotlight here, with descriptions and links down below. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you all for our next video. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.